So picture this. You're at home, maybe watching a game or just relaxing after a long day of training. The lights are low, the house is quiet, and you feel completely safe. It's your space, your fortress. But then you hear a sound, a tiny, insignificant noise from just outside that makes the hair on your arms stand up. You try to ignore it, telling yourself it's just the wind or a stray animal, but the sound comes again, a little closer this time, a little more intentional. You begin to realize that the one place you're supposed to feel secure is no longer safe. Tonight, we're diving into 3 terrifying true stories where someone was lurking just outside. These aren't tales of ghosts or monsters from some fantasy world. These are real accounts from real people who found themselves in a waking nightmare, separated from a potential threat by nothing more than a thin pane of glass or a single locked door. These stories will make you second-guess every creak and groan your house makes and have you checking your locks twice before you go to bed. So, I invite you to get comfortable, but not too comfortable. Lock your doors, turn off the lights, and get ready to be scared. Because tonight the strange, dark, and mysterious is not in some far-off place. It's right on the other side of your wall. We're going to explore what happens when the barrier between your safe world and the dangerous unknown begins to crumble. And I have to warn you, these stories are not for the faint of heart. Our first story takes us to a small, quiet town in rural Ohio, where a young woman named Sarah lived alone in a modest one-story house she had just moved into. It was her first time living completely by herself, and while she cherished the independence, the isolation of the countryside could sometimes feel unnerving, especially after dark. One Tuesday night, after a long shift at the local diner, Sarah was curled up on her couch watching a movie. The only sounds were the dialogue from the TV and the gentle hum of the refrigerator. It was just after midnight when she heard it. Knock, knock, knock. The sound was firm, deliberate, and it came from her front door. Sarah immediately muted the TV, her heart jumping into her throat. Who would be knocking at this hour? She wasn't expecting anyone. Her friends and family all knew she worked late and would never drop by unannounced, especially not after midnight. She crept to the front window, her body tense, and carefully peeked through a slit in the blinds. The porch light was off, shrouding the entrance in almost complete darkness. She couldn't see a car in the driveway or anyone standing on the porch. It was just an empty black void. She told herself it must have been a branch hitting the door, carried by a sudden gust of wind. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing pulse, and went back to the couch. She unmuted the TV, but she couldn't focus on the movie anymore. Every shadow in the room seemed to dance menacingly. A few minutes passed in silence, and she started to relax, convincing herself her mind was playing tricks on her. And then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. This time it was louder, more insistent. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't a branch. Someone was standing on her porch, hidden by the darkness, and they wanted in. The fear that had been simmering inside her boiled over into pure terror. Sarah grabbed her phone, her hands trembling so badly she could barely unlock it. She didn't dare look through the peephole, terrified of what she might see on the other side. Instead, she tiptoed into her bedroom, the furthest room from the front door, and hid in the closet, pulling the door almost completely shut. She dialed 911, her voice a barely audible whisper as she explained the situation to the dispatcher. The knocking had stopped, replaced by an even more terrifying silence. Was he gone? Or was he waiting? As she sat huddled in the dark, she heard a new sound, a soft, scraping noise coming from the side of the house, right below her bedroom window. The police arrived within 10 minutes, their flashing lights cutting through the darkness and flooding her home with strobes of red and blue. They swept the property, their flashlights scanning every corner of her yard, but they found nothing. There were no footprints in the soft dirt beneath the window, no sign of forced entry, and no one in sight. The officer suggested it might have been some local kids playing a prank, but Sarah knew better. The knocking felt too aggressive, too personal. She never felt safe in that house again, and for the rest of the time she lived there, every single night was spent with the unnerving feeling that someone was out there in the dark, just watching and waiting. Our next story centers on a family of 4, the Millers, who had recently moved into their dream home in a leafy suburb of North Carolina. It was a beautiful 2-story house with a large fenced-in backyard that bordered a dense patch of woods. For the father, David, the backyard was the main selling point. He imagined summer barbecues and his 2 young children, a boy and a girl, playing safely for hours. For the first few months, it was idyllic, but that sense of suburban peace was about to be shattered in the most horrifying way possible. It started with small, unsettling occurrences. The gate to the backyard, which David was meticulous about locking every night, would sometimes be found slightly ajar in the morning. Toys left on the lawn would be moved to different spots overnight. At first, David blamed it on forgetfulness or the wind, but a gnawing feeling in his gut told him something was wrong. One evening, his wife, Emily, was washing dishes at the kitchen sink, which had a large window overlooking the backyard. As she gazed out into the twilight, she saw a flicker of movement near the tree line at the very back of the property. She squinted, trying to make out what it was. It was tall and thin, standing perfectly still, partially obscured by the shadows of the trees. It looked like a person, a man. Her blood ran cold. She quickly turned off the kitchen light so she could see outside better without being seen herself. The figure remained there for a long, terrifying moment, a dark silhouette against the fading light. Then, as if sensing he'd been spotted, the figure melted back into the woods and disappeared completely. Emily was shaken but tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a neighbor or someone taking a shortcut. But why would they just stand there watching their house? The sightings became more frequent. David set up a motion-activated security camera, hoping to either catch the trespasser or prove it was all in their heads. A few nights later, the camera sent an alert to his phone. He opened the app, his heart pounding, and watched the recorded clip. The footage was grainy, but it was unmistakable. A tall, slender man was standing at the edge of their yard, just beyond the reach of the floodlight. He was staring directly at the house, at the children's bedroom windows. The man stood there for over 5 minutes before turning and walking back into the woods. The family was living in a state of constant fear. The breaking point came one Saturday afternoon. The kids were playing on the swing set while David was grilling on the patio. He turned his back for just a moment to grab a plate from inside, and when he turned back, he saw him. The man was no longer hiding in the woods. He was standing in the middle of their yard, not 20 feet from his children, just watching them with a chilling stillness. David screamed and charged towards him. The man didn't run. He simply turned, walked calmly to the back fence, hopped over it with an eerie grace, and vanished into the trees. They called the police, but the man was never found. The Millers sold their dream home a month later, unable to shake the image of the silent man who had invaded their sanctuary. So, this final story comes from a college student named Chloe, who was renting a room in this old, converted Victorian house near her campus in Boston. Her room was on the ground floor, which she honestly didn't love, but the large bay window that let in tons of natural light totally made up for it. She'd often study late into the night at the desk she had set up right in front of that window. Chloe felt safe enough. I mean, it was a busy neighborhood, and the window faced a well-lit street. She had no idea that this window, her favorite thing about the room, would soon become the source of her deepest fears. One night, while cramming for a midterm exam, Chloe had her headphones on, just completely absorbed in her textbook. It was well past 2 a.m., and the street outside was unusually quiet. Out of the corner of her eye, she caught this quick flash of movement. She paused, pulled one headphone off, and glanced up at the window. But she saw nothing, just her own reflection against the dark glass. She figured it was probably a passing car's headlights or maybe just her tired eyes playing tricks, so she went back to studying. But then, this weird, primal instinct made her feel uneasy. She just couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She tried to ignore it for another 10 minutes, but honestly, the feeling kept getting stronger, more oppressive. It was like a pair of eyes were boring into the back of her head. With a sense of dread, she slowly lifted her gaze from her book to the window again. This time, she wasn't looking at her reflection. Pressed against the other side of the glass, illuminated faintly by her desk lamp, was a face. It was a man's face, pale and gaunt, with wide, unblinking eyes and this twisted, grotesque smile. His breath was fogging up a small circle on the pane of glass. For a moment that felt like it lasted forever, Chloe was just completely frozen. Her mind couldn't even process what she was seeing. It was so surreal, so utterly terrifying, it honestly felt like a scene from a horror movie. The man didn't move, he just stared at her, his smile never changing. A scream was stuck in her throat like she was paralyzed by sheer terror. Finally, her fight-or-flight response kicked in. She scrambled backwards, knocked her chair over with a loud crash, and sprinted out of her room, screaming for her roommates who lived upstairs. Her roommates came rushing down and immediately called the police. By the time they were brave enough to look back into Chloe's room from the safety of the hallway, the face was gone. The police arrived quickly and searched the area, but just like in our other stories, the man had vanished without a trace. The only evidence he was ever there was a small, smudged handprint and a patch of condensation on the outside of her window pane. Chloe moved out the very next day, unable to spend even another second in that room. She never found out who the man was or what he wanted, but the image of his smiling face in her window is forever burned into her memory. The feeling of safety within our own homes is something we, often take for granted. It's a fundamental comfort, a baseline for our lives. But as these 3 stories show, that sense of security can be shattered in an instant. A knock at the door, a figure in the yard, a face in the window, these aren't just elements of fiction. For Sarah, the Miller family, and Chloe, they were the terrifying reality that the buffer between them and a potential danger was honestly, frighteningly thin. The true horror lies in the unknown. Who were these people and what did they want? The fact that they were never caught only adds another layer of chilling mystery. These stories remind us to be aware of our surroundings, to trust our instincts when something feels wrong. That strange noise you hear outside might just be the wind, but, it might not be. It's a chilling thought, knowing that a simple pane of glass or a wooden door is all that separates our sanctuary from the unpredictable world outside. It makes you think about all the times you've been home alone at night and heard a strange sound. It makes you wonder. If you enjoyed these stories and you have a story of your own you'd like to share, please send it to me at the email in the description below. I read every single one. And make sure to subscribe for more real-life horror. Thank you for watching. And remember, sometimes the scariest things are right outside your door. Be safe out there.